Adrian Keller knew something was wrong long before the shouting began. The office felt different that morning, quieter than usual, like a storm waiting behind glass walls. Employees avoided eye contact as he walked through the hallway. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones lowered. Screens minimized too quickly. The unease followed him all the way to his office, settling heavily on his shoulders. He placed his coffee on the desk and noticed the blinking notifications on his computer. Dozens of messages, missed calls, urgent emails marked in red. Investors, journalists, board members, even former competitors. Stomach tightened. He opened the first email, then the second, then the third. Each one carried the same link. Confused, Adrian clicked. A video loaded instantly. The title alone made his chest tighten. Global reveal of next-generation energy system. The presenter stepped onto a stage surrounded by flashing cameras and a crowd of investors. Adrian leaned closer to the screen, already feeling dread crawl into his thoughts. Then the camera zoomed in. Marcus. Hale smiled confidently beneath bright lights. Adrian froze. Marcus stood beside a large digital model. A rotating design, Adrian recognized immediately. Every line, every detail, every concept came from 3 years of Adrian's life. Sleepless nights, failed prototypes, endless calculations. The project had been their company's biggest secret. It's protected by strict contracts and security systems. Yet here it was, displayed openly to the world. Marcus began explaining the technology, speaking with calm authority, describing features Adrian himself had invented. Applause filled the hall as investors nodded in approval. Adrian's hand slowly tightened around the mouse. No, he whispered. The video ended with an announcement. The technology had been sold to an international consortium earlier that day. Sold. Adrian pushed back from his desk so suddenly the chair rolled into the wall. His heart pounded as disbelief turned into heat rising through his chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a leak. Marcus had done this himself. The office door opened quietly. Lena Park stepped in, holding a tablet close to her chest. She had worked with Adrian for 5 years and rarely looked uncertain. But now her expression carried hesitation. You've seen it, she said gently. Adrian stood up slowly, anger building faster than he could control. Tell me this is fake. Lena shook her head. It was uploaded this morning, she said. Multiple platforms. The announcement came from Tibet. The word sounded unreal. Tibet, Adrian repeated. She nodded. The signal originated from a research facility there. Adrian stared at her, waiting for explanation, but none came. The silence stretched until frustration exploded out of him. Delete those photos, he shouted suddenly, pointing at the tablet. All of them. Every post, every copy. Call legal. Shut it down now. Lena didn't move. Her calmness only made the moment worse. Sir, she said carefully, we can't. Adrian's voice rose again. What do you mean we can't? Marcus authorized the release using executive access, she replied. Legally, he had clearance. The words struck harder than any insult. Executive access. Adrian felt the ground shift beneath him. He and Marcus had shared equal authority since the company began. They had trusted each other completely, never imagining they would need protection from one another. That trust now felt like a mistake. Adrian grabbed the tablet from her hands. Images flashed across the screen, detailed photographs of prototypes, internal diagrams, private lab spaces. Even early sketches Adrian had drawn years ago were visible. Pieces of his life displayed, like public property. His breathing grew uneven. 10 years earlier, Adrian and Marcus had started Keller Innovations. In a rented garage with broken chairs and borrowed computers, Adrian had been the visionary, obsessed with solving energy problems. Marcus had been the strategist, capable of turning impossible ideas into real business opportunities. Together, they balanced each other perfectly. At least, that was what Adrian had believed. Memories rushed back without permission. Late nights eating cheap food while arguing about designs, celebrating their first investor, promising never to betray each other no matter how successful they became. Adrian felt anger twist into something deeper. Hurt. "Where is he?" Adrian asked quietly. "No confirmed contact," Lena answered. "He left the country 2 days ago." 2 days. Marcus had planned everything while sitting across from him at meetings, while discussing future projects, while pretending nothing had changed. Adrian walked toward the window overlooking the city. Rain streaked down the glass, blurring the skyline. For years, this view had represented success. Now it felt distant, almost mocking. His phone vibrated again. Another call from a board member. He ignored it. "What are they saying outside?" he asked. Lena hesitated. "The media believes you approved the deal." Adrian turned sharply. "Approved it. They think this was a joint decision." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Of course they did." From the outside, everything looked clean and professional. No one could see the betrayal behind it. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, trying to slow his thoughts. Anger pushed him toward immediate action, lawsuits, public statements, retaliation. But confusion held him back. Marcus had never acted recklessly before. Every decision he made had purpose. "So why this? What else do we know?" Adrian asked. Lena opened another file. "The sale guarantees employment contracts for all staff for 5 years. Salaries protected. Expansion funding included." Adrian frowned. That didn't make sense. If Marcus wanted profit or power, he could have taken everything and disappeared. Instead, the agreement protected employees first. The contradiction unsettled Adrian more than the betrayal itself. He sank into his chair, staring at the documents again. Pieces didn't fit together. Marcus had always argued that the company's people mattered more than profits. He had defended employees during financial struggles, sometimes against Adrian's own aggressive plans for growth. A memory surfaced. An argument months earlier about rising expenses. Marcus warning that they were expanding too fast. Adrian insisting risk was necessary for innovation. Had Marcus seen something Adrian ignored? The thought irritated him immediately. Betrayal was betrayal. There was no justification for secrecy. Still, doubt crept quietly into his anger. Outside the office, raised voices echoed as news spread further. Phones rang non-stop. Someone knocked urgently, but Lena signaled them to wait. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "For 10 years, he said slowly, "I trusted him with everything." Lena didn't interrupt. "I would have followed him anywhere." Adrian added. His voice softened. Almost surprised by his own words, that realization hurt more than the financial loss. Marcus hadn't just stolen a project, he had destroyed certainty. Adrian stood again, energy returning in sharp waves. "Prepare a statement," he said. "We deny involvement. We investigate and we find him." Lena nodded, already taking notes. As she turned to leave, Adrian spoke again. "And Lena." She paused. "When we find Marcus, I want answers before anything else." She studied him carefully, sensing the shift beneath his anger. "Yes, sir." The door closed behind her, alone again. Adrian replayed the video in his mind. Marcus standing confidently, speaking as if nothing had been broken between them. There had been no guilt in his expression, no hesitation, only certainty. That certainty haunted Adrian. He opened an old photo on his computer, the two of them years earlier, smiling beside their first prototype. They looked exhausted but proud, unaware of how complicated success would become. Adrian stared at the image for a long time. Betrayal demanded revenge. Every instinct pushed him toward it. The humiliation, the loss, the public embarrassment, all of it fueled a growing need to strike back. Yet beneath the anger lived a question he couldn't silence. Why would Marcus risk everything unless he believed he was right? The question unsettled him because it forced him to consider something uncomfortable. That betrayal sometimes grows from fear, not hatred. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Adrian closed the photo and looked at the dark reflection staring back from the screen. He barely recognized the man looking back, tired, angry, wounded. In that moment, revenge stopped being an idea. It became a goal. He would find Marcus. He would learn the truth. And if the betrayal had truly been selfish, Marcus had destroyed their shared dream for personal gain, then Adrian promised himself one thing: he would take everything back, no matter the cost. The days after the betrayal moved quickly, but for Adrian Keller, every hour felt heavy. News about the leaked technology spread across the world. Business channels replayed the presentation again and again. Experts praised the invention while questioning how Keller Innovations had suddenly given it away. Reporters stood outside the company building, waiting for answers. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Employees whispered in hallways. Some looked worried. Others looked confused. Adrian walked through the office with a calm face, but inside his mind was burning with questions. At first, he focused only on damage, control. Meetings filled his schedule from morning to night. Lawyers explained legal options. Investors demanded explanations. Board members wanted someone to blame. Adrian listened carefully, but said very little. He knew one thing. Clearly, none of them understood Marcus Hale the way he did. Marcus was not careless. He never acted without thinking 10 steps ahead. That truth made the betrayal even more troubling. Late one evening, after the office had emptied, Adrian sat alone with Lena in the conference room. The city outside had gone quiet, and the lights of nearby buildings glowed softly through the windows. Lena opened a folder filled with travel reports. "We found his flight records," she said. Adrian leaned forward. "Where did he go after leaving the country?" "Tibet," she replied again. "A private research station in the mountains." Adrian exhaled slowly. The location made sense. Remote places were perfect for disappearing. But Marcus had never liked isolation. He preferred busy cities, constant movement, loud conversations, so why hide in the mountains? Adrian rubbed his temples, thinking carefully. Revenge still burned inside him, but anger alone would not give him answers. He needed to understand what Marcus had done and why. "Trace everything," Adrian said. "Financial transfers, company, communications, anyone Marcus spoke to before leaving." Lena nodded. She had already begun the investigation. Over the next several days, she returned with small pieces of information. None of them looked like greed. The money from the sale had not gone into Marcus's personal accounts. Instead, it had been transferred directly into company protection funds and employee contracts. That discovery created more confusion. Adrian paced his office while studying the documents. If Marcus had betrayed him for money, the explanation would have been simple. But the evidence showed something else entirely. Marcus had protected the staff. He had secured their jobs for years. Adrian stopped pacing, stared at the papers. His anger shifted again, turning into restless curiosity. Something important had happened behind the scenes. Something Marcus believed Adrian would never accept. One night, Adrian stayed in the office until after midnight. The building was silent. He walked into the laboratory where the prototypes were kept. The machines stood quietly in the dim light, waiting for work that had suddenly stopped. Adrian placed a hand on the metal frame of the newest device. 3 years of effort lived inside. This design, Marcus had stood beside him during every test, every failure, every improvement. A memory returned from months earlier. Marcus warning him during a meeting, saying the company finances were becoming unstable, saying expansion was happening too. Fast. Adrian had dismissed the concern at the time. Innovation required risk. Progress always came with pressure. Now he wondered if Marcus had seen a danger Adrian ignored. The thought irritated him. but it also pushed him forward. He could not stay trapped in questions forever. If Marcus was truly responsible for this betrayal, Adrian needed to face him directly. The next morning he called Lena into his office. "I'm going to find him," Adrian said. She studied him carefully. "Are you sure that's wise right now? The company still needs you here." "I can manage both," he replied calmly. "But this situation will never end until I hear the truth from Marcus himself." Lena understood. She handed him a printed map and several documents. "The research station is here," she explained, pointing to a small mark deep in the mountains. "It's remote, limited communication. It's only a few scientists working there." Adrian folded the map slowly. A strange calm settled over him. For weeks, his thoughts had raced in circles. Now there was finally a direction. Before leaving the office that evening, he walked once more through the quiet halls. Employees were still working late, trying to keep the company stable. Some nodded respectfully as he passed. Others looked. Relieved to see him still leading, Adrian realized something important in that moment. Marcus had not only affected him, the decision had changed the lives of everyone inside this building. That made the coming confrontation even more serious. At the airport the next morning, Adrian stood beside the boarding gate with only a small bag. Lena approached him one last time. "If you find him," she asked quietly, "what will you do?" Adrian considered the question carefully. Revenge had been his first instinct, sharp and powerful. But the investigation had complicated everything. "I'll listen first," he said. "And after that?" Adrian looked out through the large windows toward the distant horizon. "That depends on whether he destroyed our dream, or I tried to save it." The boarding call echoed through the terminal. Adrian picked up his bag and walked toward the aircraft, leaving the noise of the city behind. High in the mountains, Marcus Hale was waiting, whether he knew it or not, and soon, after weeks of anger and questions, the truth would finally come face to face with the man who had been betrayed. The wind in the mountains cut through Adrian Keller's coat as he stepped out of the Jeep and stared at the research station ahead. Snow drifted across the rocky ground, moving like pale smoke under the gray sky. The building stood alone on the edge of a wide plateau, small against endless peaks. It looked less like a laboratory and more like a place someone chose to disappear. Adrian closed the vehicle door and stood still for a moment. The long journey had given him too much time to think. Anger had followed him onto the plain, across cities and through winding mountain roads. But now, standing here, the emotion felt heavier and quieter. This was no longer about headlines or business losses. This was about answers. He walked toward the entrance. Each step echoed softly against frozen ground. The door opened before he knocked. Marcus Hale stood there. For a second, neither man moved. Marcus looked thinner than Adrian remembered. His hair had grown longer, and tired lines rested around his eyes. Yet his expression carried relief instead of fear. "I wondered how long it would take," Marcus said gently. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You knew I'd come." Marcus nodded once and stepped aside. "You deserve the truth." Adrian entered slowly. The inside of the station was warm and simple. Tables covered with research notes filled the room. Screens displayed environmental data instead of business charts. It felt far removed from the corporate world they once shared. The quiet, unsettled, Adrian more than hostility would have. He turned to face Marcus. "You sold everything we built." Marcus didn't argue. "Yes." The calm answer ignited Adrian's frustration again. "You didn't call, you didn't warn me. You just vanished." Marcus folded his arms, searching for the right words. "If I had told you, you would have stopped me." "Course I would have," Adrian snapped. "Was our company?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "That's exactly why I couldn't." The statement hung between them. Adrian felt anger rise again, but underneath it was curiosity. Marcus wasn't defensive. He looked regretful, not guilty. "Start explaining," Adrian said. Marcus walked toward a table and picked up several printed reports. He handed them over. Adrian scanned the pages quickly. Financial forecasts, debt projections, investor withdrawal notices. His frown deepened. These numbers aren't right. Adrian said, they are. Marcus replied quietly, you just never saw them. Adrian flipped through more pages. Losses hidden behind expansion costs. Loans taken to support new research facilities. Contracts that depended on future breakthroughs that had not yet succeeded. The realization came slowly. The company had been closer to collapse than he ever knew. I handled the financial side, Marcus continued. Every quarter became harder. Investors wanted fast results. They were preparing to pull out. Adrian shook his head. You should have told me. I tried. Marcus said softly. But you were focused on the next innovation. Every time I raised concerns, you pushed forward harder. I admired that about you, but it scared me too. Adrian felt a sharp sting of memory. Meetings he had rushed through, warnings he dismissed as temporary problems. Marcus continued, his voice steady. If Keller Innovations failed, hundreds of employees would lose their jobs. Years of work would disappear overnight. Adrian lowered the papers slowly. So you decided to betray me instead. Marcus's expression tightened. I decided to save what I could. He explained how an international group approached him months earlier. They wanted the technology and were willing to fund its development fully. At first, Marcus refused. As financial pressure grew, the offer became the only solution that guaranteed stability. They agreed to protect every employee contract, Marcus said. 5 years of security, research funding, no layoffs. Adrian remembered Lena mentioning that detail. At the time, it felt like a strange contradiction. Now it sounded deliberate. You made that decision alone, Adrian said quietly. Marcus nodded, because I knew you would never give up control. The truth hurt because it was accurate. Adrian had always believed perseverance solved everything. Failure was something he refused to accept. But Marcus had been looking at survival. Instead of ambition, silence filled the room. Outside, wind pressed softly against the windows. Adrian walked toward the far wall, trying to organize his thoughts. For weeks he imagined confronting a selfish traitor. Instead, he stood before a friend who looked exhausted by responsibility. You could have trusted me, Adrian said finally. Marcus's voice softened. I didn't trust myself to convince you. That answer struck deeper than anger ever could. Adrian turned back. So you ran away? Marcus gave a faint smile. I stepped aside. The company needed stability, not a fight between its founders. Adrian studied him carefully. There was no sign of victory in Marcus's face, only relief mixed with regret and Tibet. Adrian asked. Marcus gestured around the station. I wanted somewhere quiet to continue research without pressure. Somewhere success or failure wouldn't hurt anyone else. Adrian walked slowly through the room, noticing small experiments and handwritten notes. Marcus had returned to pure science. The passion that existed before business complicated everything. A realization settled heavily inside Adrian. Marcus had not taken the company away from him. He'd sacrificed his own place in it. You knew everyone would hate you, Adrian said. Marcus nodded. Including you. Adrian clenched his fists. Weeks of anger surged again, but now it fought against understanding. Revenge had guided him here. He imagined lawsuits, public exposure, complete destruction of Marcus's reputation. Yet looking at Marcus now, revenge felt strangely empty. What did you expect me to do when I found you? Adita asked. Marcus shrugged lightly. Whatever you needed to do to move forward. The honesty left Adrian speechless. He stepped outside onto the snowy ground, needing air. The mountains stretched endlessly under pale sunlight. No crowds, no cameras. No board meetings. Just silence. He realized how loud his life had become before this moment. For years, he chased growth without pause, believing success justified every risk. Marcus had seen consequences Adrian ignored. The betrayal still hurt. Trust had been broken. Decisions had been stolen from him. But revenge would not restore trust. It would only create another loss. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, imagining two futures. In one, he destroyed Marcus legally and publicly, proving he was right. In the other, he accepted the painful truth that both of them had tried to protect the same dream in different ways. When he returned inside, Marcus looked up cautiously. "Well?" Marcus asked. Adrian stood quietly for a long moment. "I came. Here, ready to ruin you," Adrian admitted. Marcus nodded, accepting it. "But revenge won't fix what happened," Adrian continued. "And it won't rebuild the company." Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly, though regret remained in his eyes. "You still should have trusted me." Adrian added. "I know," Marcus said. The apology felt real. Adrian placed the financial reports back on the table. "Next time," he said, "we face problems together, even if we disagree." Marcus smiled faintly. "There won't be a next time. The company belongs to a different future now." Adrian considered that. For the first time since the betrayal, he accepted the truth. Keller Innovations had changed. So had they? He extended his hand. Marcus hesitated only a second before shaking it. The gesture did not erase pain, but it ended the war Adrian had carried inside himself. Later, as Adrian prepared to leave, Marcus walked him to the door. "Art, you angry?" Marcus asked quietly that Adrian thought carefully before answering. "Yes," he said honestly, "but I understand." Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight reflected across the snow, bright and calm. As Adrian walked back toward the waiting vehicle, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. Revenge had promised satisfaction. Yet understanding brought something deeper. Peace. During the long journey home, Adrian reflected on everything that had happened. Betrayal had forced him to confront his own blind spots. Ambition had made him stop listening. Trust had failed because communication failed first. Months later, Adrian started again with a smaller team and a different approach. He listened more, questioned more, shared responsibility instead of carrying it alone. He never forgot the pain of betrayal. But he also never forgot the moment he chose not to let revenge define him. Because in the end, revenge would have destroyed. 2 lives. Understanding allowed both to continue, and Adrian finally realized something he had never understood before. Sometimes the greatest victory is not proving someone wrong, but choosing not to become someone you no longer respect. The mountains faded behind him, but the lesson remained. Revenge promises closure. Forgiveness creates it.